Now, primarily, what people visit Osala to see are primates. We're going to be starting off with monkeys, but it's really apes that they're looking for. The monkeys that you see here are fairly common. They haven't been hunted, but they are a little bit skittish. Now, one way that you can tell a monkey from an ape is that no ape has a tail. So if you see a primate with a tail, you can be pretty sure it's not an ape. The tails on old world monkeys tend to be hanging straight down, or at least they're not prehensile. Prehensile tails are limited to monkeys in the New World. So if you see a monkey hanging by its tail, you'll know that that's not an Old World monkey. On the other hand, some monkeys don't have tails. So how do you tell the difference between a monkey that doesn't have a tail and an ape? Well, you look at the shoulder, because an ape will have a rotating shoulder. Monkeys, when they're in the trees, walk along the top of the branches as though they were cats or something. But apes can swing using their arms underneath the branches. So the animals that you see here are clearly old world monkeys because they do have tails, and because those tails are obviously not prehensile. Both monkeys and apes tend to live in family groups of one size or another. Apes usually in smaller family groups, but monkey family groups can be quite large. Ozala has a number of different kinds of monkeys. There's the gray-cheeked mangabe and the putty-nosed monkey. Most of the ones that you've seen were putty-nosed monkeys. And DeBraz's monkey. Also, there's a mustached monkey. And later on, we're going to be taking a look at some colobus. Now, although most monkeys, including the putty-nosed monkeys, tend to live in groups, I do know of one putty-nosed monkey named Bob who apparently is pretty single. And he hangs out at one of the lodges. The folks at the lodge say that they've never fed Bob, and frequently he goes away for a day or two, but he usually comes back. So why Bob hangs around the lodge is not entirely clear. It may be that he's just lonely for other primates, and maybe he just could never find a group of putty-nosed monkeys that he could fit in with. In any event, this is Bob. He had been absent from the lodge for a couple of days, but he came back for a short visit while I was there. Hey, Bob is wounded on his left arm. He must have been out fighting with someone. About a decade ago, scientists announced that putty-nosed monkeys could actually speak in sentences using syntax. Before that time, it was largely assumed that only humans did that. Putty-nosed monkeys have one alarm call for leopards and a separate alarm call that sounds quite different for hawks and eagles. If they combine the two of them, basically it means something entirely different, like let's get out of here.
We fight. No? Fight.
The black and white colobus monkeys are a fairly large monkey. They're very distinctive, and they're pretty widespread over Africa, so any place that you go, you're very likely to see one. These colobus monkeys are a little bit camera shy, but the next colobus monkey is a real poser. He seems to love to get his photograph taken.
das ist nicht richtig schlimm. Das ist immer noch nicht richtig. Da ist ein rotes Lämpchen auf Strom. Ah, ah. Ah, gut. So.
These are all the same monkey. He just keeps changing his pose until you find a pose that you particularly like to photograph, and then he'll let you do it.
Das kann ja nicht, das ist eine Gewürzsäule. Zuckersäule. Steht da irgendwas? Das ist eine Zuckersäule.
In addition to gorillas, this area also has common chimpanzees. There are two basic types of chimpanzee, the bonobo or dwarf chimpanzee and the common chimpanzee. The common chimpanzee is north of the Congo River and the bonobo is south of the river. In this particular area, the kind of common chimpanzee that they have is the central chimpanzee. The chimpanzees I'd seen in the past were mostly eastern chimpanzees. The bonobos are smaller and less aggressive than the common chimpanzee. In fact, they're frequently referred to as the hippies of the chimpanzee world. They like to make love instead of war. There is also a type of chimpanzee, eastern chimpanzee, that is referred to as a billy ape because it lives in the billy forest. It's a very large chimpanzee. Not very much is known about it. It's about the size of a human being. This next is a central chimpanzee. Now these chimpanzees are not habituated, and so the result is if you get it within 100 yards of them, they're gone.
He's looking at us. Do you want me?
À la gauche. Ouais, je le vois.
Would you like me to try and get a photo for you, Ingrid?
This is one of those situations where the subject of the photography was as curious about the photographer as the photographers were about the subject.
Did you ever wonder where the word gorilla comes from? Well, the story goes back a long ways. The fact of the matter is that Necho II was Pharaoh of Egypt at one time, and he hired the Phoenicians, who were the world's greatest sailors, to go around Africa. They went out through the Red Sea and they came back through the Pillars of Hercules, which we call Gibraltar today. Trip took them a couple of years. And we're pretty sure that that story is true for the very reason that the Greeks didn't believe it. You see, the Phoenicians reported that at some point along their trip, the sun appeared to be in the northern part of the sky instead of in the southern part. Now, the Greeks knew that that never happened. The sun was always in the south. But today we know that when you go below the equator, as the Phoenicians apparently did, the sun does appear to be in the north. Now, about 100 years after that, in about the 5th century BC, there was a Phoenician sailing for Carthage, General Hanno the navigator. And Hanno took 60 ships. And if you figure about 50 people per ship, you're talking about several thousand people. And he went around down the side of Africa. And the reason that he did that was to establish colonies. But when he got to near the end of his trip, as far down the coast of Africa as he intended to go, he discovered something very interesting. What he discovered, the local people called gorillas. And he reported that they were very hairy people. Now, we're not sure just exactly what Hanno discovered. We don't know if they were chimpanzees, we don't know if they were gorillas, we don't know if they were some kind of other ape, or if they were really just hairy people. But in the 19th century, when people started discovering actual gorillas in Africa, they remembered the name that Hanno gave those animals.
It's a good day for going to sea. Hanno the navigator said to me, there's an open sky and a steady breeze out beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Above the foam-kissed waves, seagulls scream. Up in the masts of our trireme, and it's a good day for going to sea. Hanno the navigator said to me, water, water, from horizon to horizon, all I see is water. Steer beyond all maps and charts, down along the coast of Africa. The first Phoenicians on this beach, where the monkeys gibber and the parakeets screech. Strangest women run wild down there, covered head to toe in fur and hair. They fight like demons, better let them be. Hanno the navigator said to me, water, water, from horizon to horizon, all I see is water. Oarsmen pull and cuss and sweat underneath this creaking deck. At night I hear their stories told, strong through storms and weak for gold. Carthage stands like an azure pearl, here in the middle of the known world, and it's a good day for going to sea. Hanno the navigator said to me, water, water, from horizon to horizon, all I see is water, water, water. When my sailing days are done, I'll see Poseidon's daughter. a good day for going to sea. Hannah the navigator said to me.
There are two basic types of gorillas, Western and Eastern. It's the Western gorilla that you most often see in zoos. Eastern gorillas are much more rare. And it's the mountain gorilla that is a type of Eastern gorilla. Here, the little red dots are the mountain gorillas, and the green areas are Eastern gorillas. But what we're interested in is in the blue areas. Those are Western lowland gorillas. And the arrow points to where we are. In 2008, the Wildlife Conservation Society did a survey in this area. They located 125,000 gorillas that had been unaccounted for. Those numbers have been declining, but maybe not for the reasons that you'd expect. About 5% of the gorilla deaths can be attributed to poaching, but a third of the deaths are probably caused by Ebola. Gorillas are very susceptible to Ebola, and Ebola is in this area. In the recent past, Ebola has in fact wiped out entire gorilla populations in localized areas. So now we're looking for Western lowland gorillas. Scientific name, gorilla, gorilla, gorilla. And we're looking for signs. Here's a sign right here. Oh, and by the way, this is the gorilla you're most likely to see in a zoo. One of the best places to find gorillas is at the salad bar, and that is in fact where I am right now. Those large leaf plants tend to be one of the gorilla's favorite foods. And incidentally, finding a gorilla generally requires a certain amount of walking, sometimes quite a bit of it, sometimes many hours. But green stuff is not the only thing that gorillas eat. This red fruit on the ground, that's a residue of a fruit that a gorilla has eaten. And there are other things that gorillas eat as well, and sometimes they're concentrated in a particular area. And those areas tend to have cameras, game cameras attached to trees that go off whenever there's movement around them. And that's how the rangers find out what kind of activity there is in a particular area. By the way, poachers don't particularly like camera traps, and they have a tendency to destroy or vandalize them.
I know very little about.
Yes, but what you're telling me is you think it's something the gorillas did.
I do think it is something that the gorillas did.
And if you're not in the picture, I can't tell what size the hole is.
Very well. The tracks that we found earlier, the gorillas were here in the last day or two. And the trail that I did 2 days ago came straight past here.
Hmm.
And this hole was not here. This hole was dug yesterday or the day before, probably. Early yesterday or the day before the rain we had yesterday. Still quite wet because of the shade. But gorillas will dig holes like this to find roots. And it's only here in Odzala that we have gorillas that dig for roots. Nowhere else in the world, nowhere else in Africa do gorillas dig for roots.
I find that somewhat surprising. I would have thought that all gorillas would dig for roots.
On the scale that we have here, where gorillas will create little clearings around trees in the forest,
Mm-hmm.
that is unique to here. Gorillas in other places will sometimes, if there's an exposed root from a hog or something coming through and digging it up, they might pick it up and eat it. But here, between a few kilometers west of here, northwest of here, to about 15 to 20 kilometers southeast of here, is the only known place where gorillas actively open up areas to dig for roots. And something like this would be gorillas excavating to find out if there's a good root source here. They can come back here. Obviously, you can have a look at the size of this hole, how deep it is. It shows you how valuable the roots are to them. Whether it's the sugar or the taste, or if it's medicinal, that is something we don't know yet. I do know that these things are in the lab as we speak, and in the next, hopefully 3 months, the paper will be published and we will know. That's what I know about this hole.
As we moved through the forest, we came upon a gorilla nest.
Il fait. C'est le cili postupilique.
T'as compris?
C'est le matelas.
Le matelas, oui.
Il n'y a pas de voix.
I asked my guide, Alon, to get into the gorilla bed so that we could see in the filming about what size it happens to be. He's a little reluctant to do that, slightly embarrassed, because you see, gorillas normally defecate in their beds when they leave them, and for that reason and probably others, they don't go back to them. So he's a little ginger about precisely where he's putting his
Les
posterior.
crottes. Il ne fait pas les crottes à l'intérieur.
Normalement, oui.
Il le fait ici aussi.
Maintenant,
Je pensais que c'était pas le cas.
normalement, c'est le matin, les gorilles déféquent
Oui, c'est ça. Dans le nid.
dans le lit.
Il y en a un autre là. Il y a un autre là.
You may have noticed that Alon, my guide, has some rose clippers with him that he uses to trim the shrubbery back. He does that in order to keep the trails clear. And he uses the rose clippers instead of the machete for small jobs, largely because it's much more quiet than using the machete. When we get close to the gorillas, we have to go in disguise as medical surgeons.
Don't move.
I know. He'll chase me, I know. I've read the books.
You did good.
Where'd you go?
I ran away. Sorry.
Unlike that gorilla, my gorillas were habituated and well behaved. There were two basic groups, one led by the silverback Jupiter and the other one by the silverback Neptune. And basically, we're going to be taking a look at Jupiter's family first and then switching over to Neptune. Some of the noise that you hear in the background is some of the boys trying to sort out who is the top gorilla just below the silverback. When you see one of the gorillas here eating something that could be ants, it is ants that they're eating. And Jupiter is also able to get his because the ants are on the ground floor as well as up in the trees. And that's not a problem for him. Later on, when we take a look at Neptune, you'll see that his family is eating more fruit up in the trees. Well, Neptune is a big silverback, and he has difficulty getting up in the trees, and so he is down at the base of the trees. You may hear some grunting or something, and he's asking for his family to send him down some fruit, and reluctantly they do so. Now, after I left, in fact several days after I left, I was told that Neptune was up in a tree getting fruit for himself. He apparently wasn't getting enough by asking his relatives. And he fell out of the tree. Now, I haven't heard whether or not he was injured in that fall. The gorillas are only allowed to be visited once a day and only for about an hour so that they're not too stressed. And our time is about up. But before we go, take special notice of the fact that there is an infant in both the upper and lower left quadrants of the video. Now focus on the baby in the upper left. Mom is trying to hide her infant from the dangerous predators below, but her baby wants to have a look in the worst way.